Overboard is a national treasure, where exaggerated caricatures of the filthy rich are juxtaposed against the heart of the working class. Oh, we're talking the Goldie days of Hollywood and the body of work that is Goldie Hawn's. This is part 2, so if you haven't seen part 1, consider taking a look at that first. Or don't. You can watch out of order. All that matters is that you watch. I'm Victor, you've entered the Gen Experience, and that is where Overboard comes into play. A true romantic comedy in every sense, only the plot points and devices were quite original. Once again, Kurt Russell starred along his real-life love, and the chemistry was spot on. Overboard is revered, reviewed, revisited, and reacted to countless times. Today, when most people think of Goldie Hawn, it is this film that comes to mind, and the Christmas Chronicles, but we'll have to get to that in just a moment. Going down as a true favorite, no reimagining, gender-swapping 20th century reboot can come close to the original magic. The 2018 Anna Faris remake is simply lost to time by the gold standard of Hawn films. The 80s were coming to a close, and the continually busy actress entered her third act, one that saw obvious changes to the industry and the rise of a younger Hollywood. Could she evolve enough to continue her streak, or would she fade into the sunset? 3 years after Overboard, we are all living it up in the 90s, and cultural shifts are ever present and apparent. With style and substance, Hawn forged ahead with great success, some underrated films, and met ageism head-on, ending the decade with a memorable film with star power and a powerful message. During the 60s, 70s, and 80s, Goldie Hawn was paired with some of the best stars. She was a hot ticket, and others wanted to work with her. With the likes of Warren Beatty, Burt Reynolds, Peter Sellers, Steven Spielberg, Eileen Brennan, Chevy Chase, and Julie Christie joining her in billing, it's no surprise when it was Mel Gibson's turn. His own star had been burning bright, and the 1990 Bird on a Wire showcased a version of Mel we rarely saw. It was, of course, a romantic comedy, and once again, began with a shot in the ass, but this time, it was Mel's.
Please help me. Could you look at my butt?
I pull into a gas station, and you're alive with people chasing you, and you ask me to look at your butt? I mean, that's okay. That's kind of neat. You know, Rick's alive, and he's shot in the butt. Hey, guys, guess who's alive and shot in the butt? Yeah, Rick. I'm looking at his butt right now. You lying gutless.
Goldie Hawn did not go for rehashing previous films, and although sometimes a similar formula, the original storylines she brought to the screen kept things fresh and audiences going back to the theater. A mystery thriller romance with some incredibly visualized backflashes to ground its zaniness with reality, Bird on a Wire has authentic comedy and chemistry. One of those favorites you'll find easy to re-watch. I did, thanks to movie rentals. Hawn was never afraid of trying new things, or a little drama, but Deceived in 1991 was something that put comedy on the back burner and then turned that burner off. Starring with John Hurd, this departure is an underrated classic of suspense and mystery. Very little humor in a husband who fakes his own death for his own gain, leaving his wife to uncover the truth and unmask him for who he is. Audiences didn't flock to the film, and critics and ratings have not been kind. However, it opened at number 3, and audiences gave it an A-. Perhaps odd to see her in this type of role, she played drama as she plays every character, with sincerity. House Sitter doesn't try to update the romantic comedy, and they were getting left behind as cinema changed. Goldie Hawn and her co-star, the great Steve Martin, were also getting older in an industry that gets anxiety over what to do with aging actors, especially women. Both still big names on a movie marquee, the 1992's House Sitter proved a light romp with little substance. Lots of hijinks to capture something that might be falling out of style, but still fun. It is one of the least memorable in her filmography, even with undeniably perfect performances by the two stars. Just a lackluster execution of a story that wasn't that good to begin with. Hawn was not one to rest on her laurels. If you're doing the math, she often had multiple films released in the same year. She never seemed to stop working or filming, and the movies just kept rolling. Death Becomes Her was her third 1992 release. Still teamed with the best in the business, Bruce Willis and Meryl Streep made the most of the silly premise and honorable script to make this film the cult classic it is today. Perhaps out of his element, Bruce's role is difficult to accept, but it is Goldie and Meryl who steal the show. Goldie is unrecognizable in her first few scenes in a fat suit. Something that would get jeers today was astonishing and hysterical at the film's debut. Some wonderful quotes have come from this early CGI effects comedy that you have to see to believe. Where in her first starring role, Hawn worked with the great Ingrid Bergman. She is here playing alongside Bergman's daughter, Isabella Rossellini. The movie makes up for a relatively flimsy storyline as hollow as the image-obsessed world it satires, with the endless barrage of CGI special effects that were groundbreaking for the time, leading it to gangbuster box office results, where even Rogers and Ebert gave the visual gag-heavy film with the wackadoo premise 2 thumbs down for a lack of character depth. The audience gave it a solid B, but that was enough to be #1 during its opening weekend, and gone on to give it new life in meme heaven. After taking a couple years off, she did take some time to have her children. Everyone Says I Love You was released in 1996. Goldie worked with the irrepressible Woody Allen because, well, what actor of a certain era and clout didn't? It was a notch in your belt or your bedpost. Oh, and did I mention it was a musical? Goldie was up for anything and loved to try new genres. This star-studded cast with Alan Alda, Drew Barrymore, Edward Norton, Julia Roberts, and countless others who sang their own songs and toe-tapped into 3 theaters. Yes, 3. Critics generally praised the film, but audiences weren't given much of a chance. Maybe look it up. Also in 1996, The Favorite First Wives Club premiered. When Hawn worked, she worked. Understanding the changing vibe and her place in modern Hollywood, why not start with Bette Midler and Diane Keaton in a film about being the first wives to their ex-husbands? Even wrangling Stockard Channing into the mix, Goldie Hawn takes on the role of Elise Elliott perfectly, with all the image-obsessed and over-the-top cosmetic surgery comedy being played without effort. Hawn transitioned into a role that was no longer the ingenue, with critical success and notice. This movie met new Hollywood head-on and gave actresses of a certain age a place at the table and a voice that proved there was no expiration date.
No, I need it. You're the only one who does it the way I like it.
If I give you any more collagen, your lips are gonna look like they got stuck in a pool drain.
Morning, Mom.
You'd think that a second outing with Steve Martin in 1999 would have been a success, but terrible writing for the 2 stars left the out-of-towners forgettable, and most likely a low point in both great stars' careers, as the film may have seemed out of touch with the audiences of the day. John Cleese may have been the most memorable part of a tired story that did not resonate, and was out as soon as it was released. You noticed a slow recoil from the spotlight at this time. Goldie is seen a little less often as the business changed. I am sure her choices and thoughts of how to proceed were at the forefront of her mind, when it wasn't filled with thoughts of raising a growing family. Prior to the Out-of-Towners, Goldie Hawn had directed her one and only film, 1997's Hope. Certainly trying to expand her reach in the business, she may have seen the need to look beyond what had kept her in the spotlight since the mid to late 60s. Hope is a TNT original movie starring Catherine O'Hara, Jenna Malone, and even Christine Lottie of Swing Shift, proving there was no ill will between them. Critics generally praised the film and applauded Hawn's direction that allowed the performers to shine and gave her props for the imagery in this tearjerker. It would be her only directorial credit. The 90s ended solid, even with the 1992 unmemorable Criss Cross and the bomb that was the Out-of-Towners. The decade had some certifiable hits and even some much-needed experimenting from the star. But as she closed out her Act 3, we were witnessing the sunset of her illustrious career. Her flame wouldn't extinguish, but the candle had burned down, and the Goldie Age of Hollywood was fading away. It wasn't her Hollywood anymore, but that doesn't mean Goldie Hawn was down for the count. That doesn't seem to be in the cards. With only a few more attempts to rekindle a genre that had changed, Gen Xers had the memories of the classic Hawn comedies, while coming-of-age millennials weren't buying into the Warren Beatty-led travesty of Town and Country in 2001, or with the 2002 Banger Sisters. Perhaps Goldie with Susan Sarandon as a couple of washed-up band groupies had a little spark. It did open at number 2, but made little returns after that. Even as the audience gave it a B+, the critics were not impressed. Perhaps the best days of starring roles were behind her. She may have silently already accepted this, but perhaps that's why her encore has been so satisfying. Between Banger Sisters and her next theatrical outing, Goldie Hawn focused on what was important to her. In that 15-year break, she created a course for young people to battle the threat of mental health. She is the brains behind Mind Up, a curriculum for young people that drives the importance of positivity and delivers a message of optimism that can be taught in classrooms that helps children of all ages face challenges before they become problems. Even voicing a character in this program, named what else but Goldie. The effervescent movie star had found satisfaction in the results she discovered from her own endeavors, and it may have been a tough sell to get her back onto the big screen. But after some convincing, Amy Schumer was that celebrity to talk Hawn into appearing back in the movie theaters, a place she had been away from for some time, and as we know, the finicky world changes much faster today than it did during the Gen experience. And perhaps this is a reason it didn't turn out as well as expected. Although audiences gave 2017's Snatched a B, and it opened second only behind Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, you'd be hard-pressed to find scores, reviews, or critics who didn't ravage it with criticism. The talented actresses were not noted as faltering, and the draw was there with both of them. But the script fell flat, and the few lackluster laughs delivered couldn't save it from dropping to 4th place in the second weekend, and then finally into obscurity. This mother-daughter road trip barely made it over production costs and was raked across the coals. Having been out of the spotlight for 15 years, coming back for this entry was disappointing. Even worse, for the first time in her life, Hawn was nominated for a Razzie for Worst Actress. Goldie is definitely going to end on a high note, but this doesn't mean it's the end of her career. She has proved she can move along with changing culture and sensibility, as we've seen a time or two in her career. Nothing like Madonna, but who wants to emulate her reinvention or that need for validation? That isn't to say that Hawn wasn't disappointed that her attempt to bring the musical Chicago to the big screen with Madonna didn't pan out. But she moved on with class. She has a full family and a body of work to be proud of, and she has love, not just from Kurt, but most of us in a certain generation. Choosing wisely, she has voice acted in a Phineas and Ferb episode with Gordon Ramsay, and even narrated a coming-of-age story in SPF 18. Long remembered and respected, Hawn has most recently appeared in 2 holiday films. You may have heard of them. The first, she only made a subtle entrance cameo, and the second, she headlined. The Christmas Chronicles on Netflix have proved a success for the celebrity couple and are a staple of holiday viewing today. Her Mrs. Claus manages to bring some life to a character with little personality. Goldie Hawn is a talented and iconic Hollywood presence that has navigated celebrity status and the all-too finicky world of movie making for decades. I assume you will all start to run out and begin looking back at those wonderful early films, original films, films we related to and made us feel. Films that were smart, ones that made us look at ourselves and laugh. Like so much from the Gen experience, where the best stuff came from. Thank you for watching, and please click that like for more fascinating content and press subscribe to help me out. Admission price not required.